Why can't everyone be perfect like us?
Thank you, Thérèse.
Yes.
Welcome to Deep Thoughts on the Rocks, a conversation to uncover truth regarding language, philosophy, and theology.
Yeah, in the East we have several litanies throughout all sorts of different prayers, but there's one called the Litany of Peace. And it's the one where, at the end, it's like, and for any other petitions that could be added, here's your chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, have you ever been in those situations where you're maybe adoring the Blessed Sacrament as a group for like CYO, and it's petition time, and everyone should just bring up like what's on their hearts, you know, and
Yes.
it turns into this
Yes,
like 30-minute ordeal where everyone just starts trying to top each other, you know, like, oh man, they prayed for all the military, that's good, but what about
I pray
abortions?
for all the military in the world.
Yeah. For both sides.
For both sides in the war. That peace would be in their hearts.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
for all of those affected by mean people, for all of those affected by mean people who are Christians. And you like look at someone.
Dark.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you have been to Koinonia,
yes.
the retreat. That's how that one night with all the stuff always
that can drag. Because that's a big group.
On for so
that's
long.
A big group.
Yeah, because it's like 100 people who are all told, we're here until you're done saying the things that are on your heart, and you're like, don't give them that option.
And then there's that one guy or girl that brings up 50 things, and then it finally works up the courage in someone else to maybe speak up, but then they speak up on top of someone else, and then they quiet back down, and then they don't say their petition. So it's a really weird situation.
I always walk in and I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna say one thing. That's all I'm gonna do.
If everyone could
just gonna be okay.
Yeah. And then you have the one on your mind, and you're like, okay, I'm just waiting for that golden opportunity to jump right in there, speak up, and speak something from our heart. And then someone says the exact thing you're thinking of.
Then I just switch to my generic one, which is that all people would come to know our Holy Mother, Mary of Egypt.
Mary of Egypt.
And then everyone's like, what? And then we move on.
Nice. Yeah.
Hail Buddha.
Joey, did you ever go to a retreat?
I've been to Steubenville before.
Really?
Yeah. Were you there when I was there?
I think so.
I think we went on the same one.
Yeah.
I visited there last fall, just on my own accord, kind of a thing. So there wasn't actually an event. I did a campus walkthrough, which was fun, but I had no intent on joining, so it was kind of mostly I was just there for the free food. So
nice. Father Michael went to Steubenville.
Mm-hmm. Did he say it was him that used to put roses on people's cars?
I don't know that story.
It's something from one of the Catholic Stuff podcasts. Here we are, referencing a podcast in a podcast. Is that a party foul?
I don't know. Are we actually recording?
Yeah, well, we are, but
cool. I didn't
all
know
of
that.
This is just kind of...
It's all B-roll.
Yeah.
Love B-roll.
Yeah. I don't want the pressure of knowing that this is going to get to listener land, so I'm just pretending that it's not. We haven't even properly introduced ourselves.
And I never will.
Okay.
I'll just be that voice.
That's the mystique of the show.
The listeners just have to get to know us.
Yeah.
My name is Seth, and I live in California.
Oh, God.
Neither of those things are true.
I love horses, cooking, and freestyle basket weaving.
I love just hanging with my friends, and yeah.
I'm just so grateful for family.
Yes.
I love baby Jesus. Get on my level.
Shout out to you, God.
Oh.
I bet I can think of a more obscure saint than you can.
So yeah, the roses on the cars, though.
Yeah, how was that?
Saint Teresa.
I do know about Saint Teresa.
Of, which one is it? Saint Teresa.
You're thinking of Lisieux.
Yes, of Lisieux. Yeah. People will pray the novena and then wait for a rose. So someone from Steubenville just thought, I bet people are praying novenas, so I'm just going to put the rose on random people's cars. And if they happen to be praying a novena, then that's the rose, and it'll be awesome. And so Yeah, I don't know what to think of that. It's like, it's cool that someone had the thought to do that. You know, it's a very kind gesture. It's also kind of just like a roll of the dice.
I was gonna say it's also a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the thing with the roses, like in the novena?
I guess they pray the novena and then they expect to see a rose.
Who? Just Catholics?
Yeah, yeah. If you pray it.
People who love Thérèse of Lisieux. There's
Okay.
a novena to Thérèse of Lisieux, and the tradition is that if you pray the so Thérèse in her lifetime said that anyone who prays to me, I will shower roses of grace upon them.
That sounds
I see.
like a metaphor.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I was
absolutely a metaphor. But there are people. You do
Yeah.
hear stories.
You
of
will
people
see a rose bush growing in your front lawn randomly after you prayed.
every day. No, yeah. There are stories of people seeing roses on day 9 of praying the novena, and sometimes I'm like, that's a really cool story. Actually, sometimes I'm like, you work at a flower shop.
Yeah.
Like
I saw a rose. You also saw a rose every other day.
You know, if
Right.
they can use that as a witness to the faith, though, then, you know, more power to them, because those things do happen. you
Yeah,
know.
if it like makes you holier and more in union with God,
Yeah.
go for it. If it doesn't, knock it off.
But obviously, don't be pursuing those things, because that's like God's way of saying, like, you don't have enough faith, so I'm gonna help you. You know, we shouldn't just stay on that
Right, we
level.
shouldn't
just
rely on physical
I gotta be on
things.
the miracle hunt. You know, it's
Yeah.
a scavenger hunt.
Right.
What is that saint's name? Saint Mary Magdalene de Pazzi is one of her famous quotes. Not that she's super famous, but one of her famous quotes is she had mystical visions, and someone asked her, or accused her more of like, you just think you're so much holier than us having all your visions. She's like, 1, I don't choose to have the visions. That's what makes them visions. 2, I'm only being given visions because I'm not good enough to believe in Jesus without them.
Yeah.
Right.
It's also fun. I don't know. Thomas Aquinas' Adoro te devote. I don't know if you've listened to the lyrics closely.
Which one is it?
Adoro te devote latens deitas que supis figuris vede lacitas.
I'm a terrible Thomist. I don't think I even know that one.
Oh, you've definitely
I've heard it.
You've
but I don't
definitely
know
heard it before. It's 7 verses long and it's very short. One of the verses is him basically saying, and remember, it's Thomas Aquinas writing it. So he says, though I did not have the vision of Thomas, yet I still believe in your crucifixion and resurrection, etc., etc. And so it's interesting. He's bringing up Thomas the Apostle, who's like, I won't believe in the resurrection till I touch bloody hands. But Thomas Aquinas has the beautiful section of that song where he's like, though I can't see that it's you in the Eucharist, I still believe it's you. But I like that it's Thomas Aquinas comparing himself to Thomas the Apostle, which is always fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. To the topic?
Sure.
What's the topic?
I brought a topic today from our good pal Tanquerey, Adolphe Tanquerey, very Reverend Adolphe Tanquerey, in his book The Spiritual Life.
As opposed to the other Adolf who's less reverent.
Yes.
Yeah, the less revered
Yes.
Adolf.
So today I was wanting to touch on 2 things and how they work together. One of them is a virtue. It's a subset of fortitude. It's called magnanimity. Magnanimity. It's a fun one. Magnanimous. Magnanimity.
What?
Magnanimity. There's 2 N's in there.
Yes.
Magnanimity.
And its defect, which is, I don't know how to say this, pusillanimity? Pusillanimity?
Pusillanimity.
Pusillanimity. So we'll get to
Words are
those.
hard.
Yeah, and we did not make it easier.
But also talking about something that's born from pride, which is presumption, and a subset of that is ambition. So,
Presumption is a subset of ambition? Is that what you said?
ambition is a subset of presumption.
Okay.
Go on.
I believe.
What
So
are those terms?
That will define terms,
Oh, good.
and then we can kind of start talking about them and what we think they mean.
I support this.
Awesome.
That's good. I'm glad. Okay. I lost my place.
In the world or the book?
The book.
What are you looking for? I can start riffing on it while you look stuff up in a book.
Nope, I found it.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I have an extra bookmarker in here that I didn't know about, so I'm going to pitch that. Okay. So, magnanimity, which is also called greatness of soul or nobility of character, is the noble and generous disposition to undertake great things for God and for the neighbor. This also it kind of involves a disinterested service. So you're not doing it for the sake of doing it, it seems, but that you're not doing it for like the rewards you will get from it, kind of thing. So it's just disinterested service. Yeah. And then we're getting through this. I don't want to just read the entire page. It's not that much, but
I also don't want you to read the entire page.
I kind of could figure that by the.
So
by
what
the
are you
glazed look.
even
Yeah.
happening?
I enjoy magnanimity.
So here's where he talks about ambition in this part, and then we'll go over to ambition. It is not the same as ambition, which is essentially egotistical and goads us on to surpass others by wielding authority or receiving honors. Okay?
Right.
So then...
I would say I'm interested that he brings them up together.
Yeah.
Because I've never thought of them as related before. Like, to me, they're so different.
So, to me, I see the common thread of success, like desiring to be successful.
Oh, see, I don't see that in magnanimity. Can you talk more about how you see that in magnanimity?
So it's this like greatness of soul to do like great things for God, for the church, for others, that kind of a thing. So you're like striving for greatness.
So that's what that word means, magnanimity.
Magnanimity, coming from the Latin magna anima, which literally means big soul.
Big soul.
Big life force.
Undertaking great things for God.
Interesting. Okay, I see.
So
it's like rising to a challenge.
Yeah.
In a way.
And the reason it's under fortitude, do we want to do a definition of fortitude?
Sure.
So that's the strength of soul, strength of character, spiritual vigor. It's a supernatural moral virtue that strengthens the soul in the pursuit of arduous moral good. So we're trying to pursue arduous moral good. It's when the right thing is not the easy thing, that's where fortitude kicks in, and it's supernatural. It's not of us. It's of God.
Now, see, that's where I am very interested in his definition. He says it's a supernatural grace.
Yes.
Which, on the one hand, all grace is supernatural because grace literally just means the life of God. But
yeah,
fortitude is one of the cardinal virtues. So,
Yes.
like, there is a naturalness to it.
I think so.
So, I don't know if I would define fortitude as the supernatural grace. I would say
Well,
there
grace
is...
builds on nature, so
That's
maybe
true.
that's the whole...
I would say there is supernatural fortitude, but there's also natural fortitude.
Okay.
And I find the term fortitude to me in English sounds like part of what the virtue is. Because, I don't know, fortitude to me sounds like the ability to endure suffering, which is true, but it's not all that is. Because your definition was like the ability to like pursue great things.
Mm-hmm.
In Greek, the word is andreia, which literally means manliness or courage.
For fortitude?
Fortitude, yeah. The word fortitude in Greek is andreia. In Latin, the word is virtus, manliness. And
gotta get your man card.
Yeah, and virtus is the word that becomes virtue.
Okay.
But in Latin, before the Middle Ages, it didn't have that connotation of like moral perfection. It literally meant strength, power, courage, the ability to do the hard thing. It's only in the context of doing the hard thing, doing the right thing, even though it's the hard thing, that its meaning switches over sort of to this moral virtue. I'm interested, though, also, one of the other Greek analogs of virtus. So we started the Greek word Andrea, which means courage, which often gets translated as virtus in Latin. But virtus, Latin has fewer... Oh, this is going to be a factually incorrect statement that gets my point across. I'm about to say Latin has less words than ancient Greek, which is half true. But virtus is the usual translation for two different Greek words. One of them is courage, and one of them is this word arete, which means excellence. And I'm interested in maybe it's the arete side that's more the tie-in with magnanimity. Because while I wouldn't say magnanimity isn't tied to courage, to me it sounds more like it's tied to excellence.
So, yeah, here's how he kind of classifies those. And I think this is from Aquinas, too. There are four virtues connected with the virtue of fortitude. Two of them aid us in the accomplishment of things arduous. One, magnanimity, and two, munificence. And then the other two help us to suffer in the right manner, which is patience and constancy.
Okay.
So that's what he goes into talking about. One of them
the
is
second
magnanimity.
two are more like endurance.
Yes.
And the first two are more like pursuit of excellence.
Yes, so magnanimity
Gotcha.
and munificence. And do you know that word and any kind of definition on it? I haven't read that far.
Munificence?
Yeah.
It's doing your duty. So it comes from the Latin word munera, which means an office or a duty, and then the fis part means doing. So he said magnanimity and munificence. So greatness of soul and doing your duty.
Oh, and I think also undergoing great expenses is part of the munificence. What it's saying here, like being willing to, contribute.
Yes, and that comes from the other meaning of munera, which is gift.
Oh, okay.
So munera can either mean it's something you do for someone else that you ought to do. It's got a lot of interesting sort of connotations in it. It comes to being public office. So if someone takes public office, they're fulfilling a munera. But also, if you give someone a gift, you're giving them a munera in Latin. Munera is one word for that.
Okay.
And so, or munus. Munera is the plural. And so it's the ability to do a munus, which is either giving of oneself to another, giving a gift to another, giving something to another freely, or the fulfillment of a duty. So the idea that it's something you ought to do. So it's a very wide scoping word.
So would you say like parenthood falls under that sort of category where it's like it's a gift but it's also a duty? Like you have a kid, like you should take care of it, but it's also a gift in what ways you choose to take care of a child,
Yes. There is definitely a munus of parenthood, a duty, an office of parenthood, which can involve in itself several munera.
Okay.
Several different ways of taking care of your child that actually do go above and beyond the office itself. So like you have to feed your child.
Right.
You don't have to feed them things they like.
Yeah.
That's true.
But both of those
And you
would
probably
count as a
shouldn't in a way, or like what they like at a certain point in time might be ice cream every single day or cake.
Right. Yeah. At times you have to pick one over the other because one of them trumps the other. But if you're able to give them food that they like, that also fulfills your duty to feed them well. Bonus. That is munificent.
I see.
Look at us bachelors telling people how to parent their kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you think of
I don't know. Do I count as a bachelor if I'm celibate?
I don't know.
I don't know either. That's a strong word.
That is a strong
Yeah, I
word.
guess I think of the word bachelor to mean almost the same as like available. So I would say like, no,
so you
it
would
doesn't
not call
mean
me
this.
bachelor,
Yeah.
even though I have a bachelor's degree. I would not be a
Okay,
bachelor.
well,
Yeah, it
Language
sounds
is
like
hard.
maybe we have a
Yeah.
lexical gap.
Oh, is
And
there...
Alexa, don't turn on.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks. Thank you for using a copyrighted trademark name in our podcast.
Yikes.
Just edit it out.
Odessa.
Alexis? No.
I didn't mention the company name, the parent name.
That's true.
I mentioned their.
I didn't talk about the parents. I talked about the children.
Yeah, Alexa is a.
Didn't talk
great
about
name
the
for a child.
Amazon rainforest.
Oh,
You're the worst.
So, with munificence, can
You know what that
think of
sounds
any?
like? That sounds like the name of a Disney villain.
What is that?
Maleficent is
Maleficent.
Maleficent, which just means to be wicked, to be evil.
Munificent is not that.
Munificent, no, is to perform
It's
one's duty and to give
magnificent.
gifts.
It says munificence or magnificence.
Ooh, magnificence means doing great things.
Yeah.
So it's the same magna as in magnanimity,
Yeah.
except instead of magna anima, it's magna ficere. And ficere is the verb that means to do things.
So when we say something is magnificent, it's just saying like it does great things.
Well, I mean, languages change. So I would say if you were in ancient Rome and you called something magnificia, yeah, that means it does great things. Nowadays,
Okay.
of course, the word has shifted in meaning.
E meraviglioso.
Right. I feel like
Yeah.
you could almost use that to mean like even just like beautiful or something like that. Like, oh, it's magnificent.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, I'm just looking at some mountains or something.
Yeah, and I tend to think of magnificent and majesty as similar, even though
Yeah.
they're different words.
Yeah.
And they have very different etymologies. But to me, I think things that are majestic are magnificent. And I rarely mean anything close to what they meant in Latin.
Do they have a similar root in Latin?
No.
Okay.
Well, yes. So magna means great, and major means greater. So it's the comparative form. So majestic comes from being better than the things around you. It's what it literally means in Latin. And then magnificent means does good, great things. So they're related. But like in English, they're just like synonyms almost sometimes.
So the defects of munificence or magnificence.
Real quick,
The defects.
I'm interested in... so Tanquerey's just bringing this up, and he's like, these are virtues. Right?
Yeah. In this
Why?
section. So why is he bringing it up?
No. Why does he consider them virtues? I'm interested in that. I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm interested, like, is doing your duty a virtue? Or depends what you mean by virtue. Like,
Yeah, now
by
we gotta
virtue, do
define
you
virtue,
mean just
Mike.
doing what you're supposed to? Like, bare minimum.
So this is
Munificence
the-
to me sounds like a bare minimum word in some sense. So are you doing the bare minimum of your duty? And then magnanimity is the going above and beyond.
Let's see. I'd have to read a little bit. So he's saying at times it is pride or ambition rather than virtue that inspires these undertakings. So I guess he's talking about like when you take on things. Take it on in this way using the virtues and not in a way that's a pride-based.
That's fair. What I'm asking is, do you think someone doing, literally just doing what the minimum of what they were supposed to do, would you consider that a virtue?
No.
Okay.
I don't know if he calls it that.
No, I'm just interested in what you think. I know what Tanquerey thinks because you're about to quote him, I'm sure. But I'm interested in what you think.
I think...
I'm interested in what anyone thinks.
I
but-
think it's a really tricky thing because, yeah, like pursuing success. Is it worldly success or, spiritual success that you're after? I think that's like an important question.
Yeah.
And like the crossover too. I mean, I was talking with my brother last night on this about like what is the morality of success in your occupation, in your field of work. Is it important to get promotions? Is it morally good to get promoted in your work or not? And we were just kind of talking all of that out, and we kind of came to a conclusion of, pursuing all the like certificates and promotions and things in a company to, climb the corporate ladder. It doesn't really deal with morality as long as you're providing for your family. Look at Jesus. If we're trying to be like Jesus, was he was he like the best carpenter ever? If he was a carpenter, a stonemason, whatever field of work he took on after Joseph passed away, you know, in that same trade, did he try to be the best at it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we don't really know, but we don't really hear of anything. I don't think we even have anything that he made.
No, of course not.
Or know of it, or yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. Isn't it like unsure about what Joseph even like was? Like maybe he was a carpenter, maybe he was like a stone worker or something along those lines.
What
the
word
Greek word is manual laborer.
Wow.
So it is as vague as you can have a word be.
Yeah.
And still be a concrete noun.
So it sounds like possibly something to do with construction.
It could be construction work. It could be hauling rocks. Like, it's everywhere from hired day labor. So it's interesting. Jesus talks about day laborers a lot. He talks about the people hired hourly in the town when he's talking about the parable where he's paying everyone a day's wage. And then some of them are upset because they're like, well, I worked all day and they only worked half the day. And he's like, it's my money. I can do whatever I want with it.
Right.
I didn't shortchange you.
Jesus
you agreed
is
to
like,
work for a drachma.
I have
gave you a drachma.
infinite monies, so I can give out as much generosity as I want.
Right, and he's like, and I didn't pay you less than we agreed to. I told you I'd give you a drachma for a day's labor, and you said yes, and here it is. I also gave them a drachma for an hour's labor because I chose to.
I have so many freaking drachmas.
So many drachmae.
You want to tell me what to do with my money?
What is also funny because the word a drachma is a day's wage. That's what that word stands for.
Oh, okay.
It's a coin that represents 1 day's labor.
Oh, I see.
We should bring that currency back.
Yeah.
It depends. Yeah, it depends what you think. I guess 8 hours of minimum wage is what a drachma is worth.
Huh.
If you think 8 hours work, minimum wage, that's what a drachma represents. 1 day's minimum pay for 1 day's labor.
Got it.
But where was I going with this? Somewhere. I was going places. God.
We asked about the Greek word for
Did we?
day worker.
That's been
For
a
day
The
minute.
manual worker.
Yeah. What is Joseph? So it could be anything as low as that, or it can mean skilled artisan. So it's like someone who makes fine things with their hands. It's literally the same word. It's literally anyone who does any sort of labor that they have to personally produce something. So it can be anything from manual labor in think minimum wage, 8 hour work day, hauling rocks. Or it can be something like I make fine furniture with my hands, like
I make
a woodworker.
jewelry.
And it's like, to be fair, historically, it's probably the latter, it's probably the former, not the latter. He was probably closer to being one of the poor day laborers.
Yeah.
So somebody hauling rocks.
Yeah, there's a legitimate theory that he was a rock hauler because that is one of the. Well, it's also so they moved to Nazareth. That's one of the, they end up going to Nazareth. So think when they come back from Egypt, they move to Nazareth, and so he's like a guy who's been gone for a long time, years even. And he's walking into town and trying to keep a low profile because his adopted son is one of the people that there was an order to kill them. So he's keeping low profile. So it's very likely that he worked in a very low, sort of a low industry. And that's what Christ in his humanity was doing as well for labor.
I'm sure he did it perfectly too.
I'm sure he did.
So he perfectly provided for Mary, and so.
Well, that's an interesting concept. I don't know if we want to get into that, but how could somebody? So Jesus is perfect, right? But how could somebody do something perfectly at every moment if they're doing a job like that? You know.
Yeah, and what I can say on that is, to be a good worker, to be doing good work. If you sometimes have to prioritize, which is interesting. To be a great worker, even just always trying to do everything you do it great. Sometimes that doesn't mean doing it perfectly. because are we gonna get weird sounds already? Do you guys hear that?
I
Yeah.
absolutely hear it.
Oh my gosh.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought I had a state-of-the-art system. Apparently not.
State of the art is a fun idiom that I need to explore more. in my
Okay.
life.
So where was I? Yeah,
Talking
doing
about
great
hauling
things.
rocks.
Sometimes doing the job the best means prioritizing that you do a lot of the for everyone if you have like a deadline or something to meet, and that maybe each individual part is not done perfectly, but you did it the best that you could with the time that you had. So
Right.
It also depends what we mean by perfect. So I
Yeah.
would say, I always think of drywall with this. When you put drywall up, it's way easier if the drywall has a little gap at the top and a little gap at the bottom that you cover up.
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
easy. And in fact, when you put drywall up, like the best drywallers leave gaps. And you could, if you wanted to, you could say, well, but if it fit in there exactly how it ought, snug, wouldn't that be more perfect? I disagree. I don't think it is necessarily, because perfect doesn't mean that like it's not one, like there has to be a standard of what you mean by perfect, and it's like finished, complete.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly what it needs to be.
yeah, so like under the hood of a car is a very different thing than behind crown molding.
Yeah, very much so. And also, like, the way you put, like, the trim on a door, that has to look good in its put-in state. Drywall doesn't. It has no purpose. Is it munificent to put the drywall in snug on the top and the bottom? No. Because that's not your job.
And your
It's not
working
duty.
definition
So,
on that is what again?
munificent is doing your duty, doing that which is necessary for you to do. Is it magnanimous to make the drywall fit perfectly? Maybe. One form of magnanimity could be every time I put in drywall, it's right there. But it's not necessary. It's not even remotely necessary. And in fact, it probably actually means you're putting it in slower, which is not what's desired. And so I would say in that way, there seems to be, according to Tanquerey's definitions of these terms, something that seems to be like virtue that is unnecessary, which is an interesting concept.
Virtue. Okay. So
Is there such thing as a virtue that goes above and beyond? Is there super meritorious virtue? Which I assume is something Tanqueray would say yes to. Because I assume, when did he write?
1920s, 30s, I think.
And he's Roman.
Published in English in 1930. But it was originally written in French, I think. He's
Yeah,
French.
with the last name like Tanqueray,
Yeah.
definitely. Is he from an order?
Yeah.
Which one? What are the initials? Probably on the front next to his name.
SSDD.
Cool, I have no idea. So if he's a Roman Catholic theologian in the 1920s, I would bet money on the fact that he believes there is something called superfluous or super meritorious virtue. The idea that you can actually go beyond what is required of you in the spiritual life and thus create what's called super meritorious virtue. And it's those super meritorious virtues that are the ones that benefit other souls, say in purgatory, or if you're praying to the saints. The Roman Catholic definition of like indulgences is the Roman Catholic definition of indulgence that the church has the ability to apply the super meritorious virtues of the saints to her children on earth. The idea that the saints actually did more than is necessary. And it's that like skimming off the top that then gets applied.
Why is it that so many of us have this idea in mind? Maybe it's because we're in like the purgative stage of, I don't know, of just like, all I need to do is like the bare minimum of what's necessary to get, the one sticky foot into purgatory, or I just want to get to heaven.
Yeah.
And anything beyond that kind of seems like unnecessary work.
Well, and I would say, there's a difference. They would say there's a difference between what's the minimum to get to purgatory and the minimum to get to heaven. Hence, purgatory is making up what's lacking there.
Right.
Well, I don't like that sort of thought process, because I feel like heaven is like existing in more union with God, which is an infinitely deep sort of like trench in my mind. So like saying like you doing the bare minimum, I feel like there is no bare minimum there. That goes infinitely deep of how close you can get to God, you know?
Yeah, and like we cannot attain salvation on our works alone.
Right.
Right.
Like we need
Yeah.
Jesus' salvation. That's it. Like it, yeah. He paid a debt he didn't owe, so we could. What is that cool phrase that Scott Hahn always says? So we could, because we had a debt we couldn't pay, something like that.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and this is why, like, in the Eastern churches, we don't have this. We have merit is not even a theological term, really, in the East, and that's why, like, the East historically doesn't have indulgences or anything like that. But Thomas Aquinas defines merit. Thomas Aquinas is basically to be in a state of grace and to have performed at least one meritorious action is the minimum for getting into heaven. For Thomas Aquinas.
Wow.
You have to perform at least one action of merit in a state of grace and then remain in a state of grace.
Yeah.
And so for him, if I recall correctly, I haven't read Thomas on this. Someone who I trust to know Thomas Aquinas well told me that's his definition. In a discussion where he was asking, what does the East think of merit? And I was like, no. And so that would mean any other meritorious act that a human does would be super meritorious for their attainment of heaven. All of which is a concept more or less foreign to the East. We don't think that way, in the sense. Yeah.
Yeah, everything you've been telling me so far about the difference in the thinking in the East, it's really appealing. I don't know. I like to hear the diversity, I guess.
It's good, and it does help because if you only know the Eastern, then in a sense you can get to the idea of like the good actions of a human don't count for anything. You can twist, if you take only the Eastern side of no human being can ever perform an act of divine merit, then it's sort of like, why do anything good?
Right, because I feel like you could argue, like, somebody could play the devil's advocate and argue about anything you've ever done as being an evil act.
Certainly. And so, in the East, our theology is such that it's like every act you've ever performed is imperfect, because it has at least some admixture of sin, even if the only sin is pride. But that also, this is one of the reasons the Lutheranism and the Eastern churches agree in some sense on the idea of like works, but we understand it differently. Luther basically wrote that works are completely meaningless because he was trying to avoid the error of saying works merit salvation, which is of course wrong.
Yeah, it's that pendulum swing though.
Yep. And his way of dealing with that was to basically discount works altogether. In the East, the way we talk about it is, in order to avoid the idea that good works are a cause of salvation, we describe them as good works are an effect of salvation. They are the natural manifestation of the fact that you are close to God.
Yeah, and of course, tying this into Scripture is that faith without works is dead faith.
Yep. Because it's producing nothing.
So
it's
that seems to be contrary to what Luther supposedly taught.
Luther did say that the book that verse comes from
is James?
Isn't Scripture. It's from James.
He tried to kick out James.
He did.
And then
he did kick out
everyone
James.
kind of...
And they put it back in.
They said, you can't touch the New Testament.
Yeah.
You can rip things, you can disassemble the Old Testament, but the New Testament, we're keeping that. So
to be entirely fair, he was at least consistent. He wasn't contradicting Scripture.
Because he didn't consider it
because
scriptural.
He didn't consider that book Scripture. So I'll hand him that. At least he's being consistent with his idea of sola. It's not like he was violating sola scriptura in that way. Because he was like, that's not Scriptura. So I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so that's in the way where like the East still has something, I think, a little more akin to the Western Catholicism, but at times it's understood differently. So Thomas does describe there is some causal nature to human meritorious action. Because he just, you have to do at least one. You have to have some merit, some virtuous merit. Whereas in the East, we are, in a sense, I love using the phrase allergic to. So not in the sense that we never think that way, but we always are like, what's a way that we could think about this that doesn't do that? And if there is one, let's go with that for as long as it goes. And so the idea that there's a causal relationship of human merit for salvation, the East is kind of like real hands off with it. And in the East, often we would prefer to find no answer and leave it a mystery rather than start to introduce ideas that seem to contradict what we're going with. The West has always been a little more comfortable with saying, let's look at everything and see if we can make it all work. The East is always kind of like, we found a thing that works and we're okay.
But yeah, I don't have any examples in mind, but I think that idea of doing one meritorious thing right after being in the state of grace, it's a common theme in stories of the sinner turned good, and they do that one good thing, and then something terrible happens to them, like they die or whatever. I don't know.
Yes. I think of the woman with the onion from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov.
Okay.
There's a famous story of the woman with the onion.
And it follows that motif.
It's interestingly, it's an Eastern Orthodox writer, Dostoevsky, describing someone's union with God as hinging upon an act that they've done, to be entirely fair.
Wow.
And it's a really interesting passage. But yeah, I could describe it now, or I can leave
Go for
it there.
it. If you want to, go for it. I haven't read Dostoevsky,
okay.
And I want to, so I'm interested.
This woman, she's this mean woman that's awful and nobody likes her and she doesn't like anybody else. One day, she's out in her garden and a beggar walks by and says, "Do you have anything you can give me?" And she's like digging up onions out of her garden. She's like, "You can have this onion." And she throws an onion to the guy. And that's it. When she dies, she drops into the lake of fire. She's in hell. But her guardian angel pleads on her behalf to Christ and says, "You are super merciful." And Christ says, if you can find one thing she has ever done that shows any kind of understanding of love. Okay. And so the guardian angel's like, "She gave an onion to a beggar once." And Christ is like, "I've set the bar too low, but okay, let's go with that." He says, "Okay, pull her out with the onion. And if the onion is strong enough to bear her weight, you can pull her out of the lake with it." So the guardian angel comes over with an onion and dips and, dangles it above her, and she grabs the onion and he starts pulling and she starts coming out of the water. And all the other souls in the lake of fire see that she's getting pulled up out of the fire to heaven. And so they start grabbing onto her to try and get pulled up with her. And she starts to slow down. Still going up, but she starts to slow down. And she starts getting angry at them and saying, "No, this is my onion. This is my way out of the lake of fire. This is the way I get to heaven. This isn't for you. This is for me." And she starts kicking off the people from the lake of fire.
The onion is the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah, and then the onion snaps.
Of course.
And she falls into the lake of fire and is in hell forever.
Huh.
Wow, dark.
Because it wasn't the onion.
No.
The onion was a symbol of what truly it means, union of God, the generosity, the mercy, these things, being like God. And that's why Jesus was like, if the onion is strong enough, go for it. And the onion would have pulled her up if she had been generous. And it would have, there's a really famous Eastern saint, Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who has a beautiful line. If you attain the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, 1,000 around you will be saved. And that's going into the story of like all the other people in the lake of fire could have been drawn out with her.
Yeah.
But because she
Right.
was inward focused, she was self-centered. Not only does she go to the lake of fire, she actually damns all the souls around her as well.
Yeah.
That tried
That's
to
kind of
use
how
her to
sin
get
works.
pulled up.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting that's how good works. And sin both work. They affect the people around you.
Yeah, they're a manifestation of God's love. They aren't themselves God's love. You know, it's not like we, again, from an Eastern perspective, it's not that her giving the onion to the beggar was itself actually meritorious on its own. It's the fact that it can manifest grace. And grace is God, and God is the one that truly merits things. And so it was when it was revealed that actually she does not have the divine life flowing through her at all. When it's her sort of her fate in hell. Her freely chosen fate in hell is revealed.
Yeah, and back at the beginning of the story, it's kind of interesting to think about. I don't know if I agree that just like doing one good thing is all it takes. You know, that kind of attitude. But I guess that is what Aquinas is saying, right?
Well, but caveated to be in the state of grace, which means to
takes
receive
work.
the sacraments and to
Yeah.
believe in Christ and to pray.
Right.
Like that.
He also said you have to remain in a state of grace.
Remaining in a state of grace involves a lot of things.
Which means you're
Yes.
most likely to do more acts
yes.
in that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so if we're thinking of acts as the effect of being in a state of grace.
Yeah, sorry. So the way that didn't make sense in my head is, well, I did this one good thing once, but I am a wretched human being. I mean, we're all wretched in
Right.
one way or another. But if you are not in a state of grace and you continue your life in that way and die in that state,
It's not like you can
but you
justify
did one good
everything.
thing way back when.
Yeah, Thomas Aquinas would say if you ever lose the state of grace, all merit of all actions you've ever done is null and void.
Wow, yeah. And I've also heard, too, that prayer is effective in the state of grace. And I don't remember as much about this because I just heard it in
Right.
passing. But that when you're not in the state of grace, something about your prayers are not as effective.
Depending how you think of prayer, yeah. So since prayer's primary effect is to change the prayer, it's
Right.
not being in the state of grace. It's not that your prayer becomes less effective. It's that you become less able to receive the effects.
Yeah.
If we want to
But,
caveat
of
that.
course, that to maintain your regimen of prayer life, whatever that is, even when you're not in a state of grace, because it is like good to be forming the habit. Whether you're getting like the spiritual benefits out of it in the moment or not, you know.
Thomas Aquinas also describes when a soul returns to the state of grace, then all of the merits of all their past actions, even those performed in a state of sin, are reapplied to the soul. So
Okay.
this is what in the East I would call a clunky solution to an unnecessary problem. Because it just sounds really like, well, once you're out of a state of grace, you have no merit.
This is very
But
Western.
you should keep doing things, because once you're back in a state of grace, even though those things meant nothing when you did them, they'll mean things once you're back in a state of grace. And I'm like, that sounds a lot more complicated than just being like, sometimes you're a bad person and sometimes you're a good person. Hopefully Christ is merciful. Like, one of these sounds a lot simpler to me.
Wow.
One of them is a lot more rigorous philosophically. And
Yeah.
I'll hand that to Thomas on a silver platter.
And it can be encouraging too to stay in a state of grace.
Oh, certainly. In the East, we don't really distinguish between state of grace and state of
Yeah,
sin.
I know.
We don't talk about them in the
That's
same
one
way.
of the things I find really interesting.
Yeah.
Because there are the people that just kind of obsess over this in the
That's
West. They're
true.
just, I use the Lord's name in vain, and so now I can't receive the Eucharist until I go to confession, and just all of these things.
Right.
If I die, on my way to work this morning before I go to confession this afternoon, then I'm damned to hell, kind of a thing. And it's just
Right, that's
Yeah,
something I
people
thought,
get that's
even when
almost
I was like a
scrupulous,
little
though.
kid, and the first time I heard that, if you die in the state of mortal sin, then you're going to go to hell, and I was like, what?
Yeah,
Unlikely story.
Yeah, it depends so in the East, we would say that, well, the East has a different definition of mortal sin, though. So the East would
Yeah.
agree. The East would say if you die in a state of mortal sin, you will go to hell. But that's because in the East, the most common definition of mortal sin is sin for which you have no repentance.
right.
Sin for which you actively do not want to, like, you do not want to convert from it.
Yeah.
So if you die
And that plays a big role
not
too.
wanting to be in union with God, then that if you're actively willing to go to hell when you die, well, you're going to go where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So even before finding time to go to confession, I oftentimes am committing a mortal sin or something that I believe is that way, than just, immediately making an act of contrition, because you can do that on
Absolutely.
your own and just be repentant, before going
Right.
to
And then it's
confession.
like, well, what's the obviously there's like we have definitions of a mortal sin. We have like the 10 Commandments and whatnot, but there's also like sin where it's like maybe you're not doing as much good as you possibly could be. Like
that is
venial sin.
Yeah, and also it kind of sounds too like some sins are, what is that, active, like you're doing something wrong, and other things are sins of omission where you failed to do what was good.
Right.
Are all okay? This is an interesting question. Are all sins of omission venial?
Maybe.
I
I
guess-
would say absolutely not, because let's say I have a child in front of me, and someone is pointing a gun at the small child in front of me, and I legitimately have all the time in the world. All I have to do is pick the child up, move them, and the bullet won't kill them.
right.
If I don't do that, if I willfully say I could save this person and I choose not to, that would be the sin of omission of murder.
That's an accessory to a mortal sin, though. That's not an actual mortal sin.
You're right.
accessory.
But being a willful accessory to a mortal sin is a mortal sin
Yes.
in Western theology. So I mean, I'll just
Yeah. No, I
hand
know.
that one.
I was just
The 9 ways that you can participate in someone else's sin is a list that I don't have memorized.
okay. Well,
but
we should jot it down as a topic for a further episode.
we should. That'd be good. We can also talk about, in the East we have mortal sins, venial sins, and involuntary sins.
Yeah.
Which the Western Church doesn't recognize involuntary sins. They
But-
don't use the language of sin specifically. Aquinas,
Yeah, we don't use that term, but we do talk about, like I mentioned earlier, example of habitually using the Lord's name in vain.
Mm-hmm.
That's not. I don't think you would even qualify that as a mortal sin, because it's of serious matter, because it's breaking one of the 10 Commandments. It's serious
Right.
to God, and but you aren't like willfully doing it.
Aquinas would disagree with you.
Okay.
He would say that is a mortal sin every time, because you are always in charge of the words that come out of your mouth.
Okay.
Always. Unless your mind is altered to the point where you literally cannot choose.
In which case, if it was your fault that your mind became in that state, then
Yeah,
those
you're
mortal
still-
sins
they're still
are
on you.
your
Yeah. But if you,
Yeah.
like, say you're sleep talking and you use the Lord's name in vain, Thomas Aquinas would say, okay, whatever. You don't
Right.
control your words in your sleep.
yeah.
But just because you formed a habit, that doesn't mean it's not a sin. It just means it's now a vice.
Okay.
As opposed to, so his definition of habit, or virtue and vice, virtue is the habitual inclination to do the good with ease, promptitude, and joy.
Yeah.
Vice is the opposite. It's the habitual inclination to do the bad with ease, promptitude, and joy. And so, just because you sin all the time doesn't
make it
suddenly
okay.
mean it's not a sin.
Right.
Would be Thomas's response.
Or like the logic where it's like, well, everyone does it all the time. Like,
Yeah. So his definition of vincible ignorance, or the things that can lessen culpability, is much smaller than I think is often taught. So we talk about like addictions as removing culpability. Thomas Aquinas would not. He does not talk about, if you're addicted to, say, I would say taking heroin recreationally is a sin, because it destroys your ability to access your free will. Just because you're addicted to heroin does not excuse the use of heroin. Every time you use heroin, whether you're addicted to it or not, you are choosing to do something.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
much more tragic, but it's still bad. Like, it's not excusable. It's understandable,
Right.
but not excusable.
I have a classmate, or had a classmate in high school that unfortunately just a couple weeks ago killed himself. And so we've been praying for the repose of his soul,
Yeah.
and kind of thinking about, okay, I remember in high school this individual, denounced God and chose to get on the atheist train, and started the use of mind-altering drugs. and then got into lots of other things like transgenderism and things like that. So it was just kind of a giant wreck. So we kind of are asking ourselves, is there any chance of this person getting to heaven? Or else we wouldn't pray for them. If they're in hell, there's no need for prayers because there's no hope. But kind of just talking through that with my spiritual director, we were kind of discussing about how this person maybe didn't know God, like the correct definition, the correct understanding of who God actually is. They had a misunderstanding of who God was. And so if they presented their idea of God and denounced it to you, you would say, well, yeah, I denounce that too. That's not what God is.
Sure.
So did they really denounce God? Or did they not did they not have the opportunity to understand the true meaning of who God is? Not that we can comprehend it, but there's that. And then also mind-altering drugs. Your brain can get so scrambled up that I don't know, is it killing yourself is a mortal sin, right? Taking your own life.
It's grave matter.
It is.
To be more precise, but yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's a grave, serious matter. But because this individual had taken drugs, are they completely responsible for that sin? Can we know that they're completely responsible for that sin?
You can never know if another person is completely responsible for anything, which is the fun part.
Yeah. So
that's why you have.
So as we're laying down these rules.
The rules are there for you to be able to follow and to discern truth, goodness, and beauty within yourself, and to help other people, as much as you can. But when it comes to it, you actually don't have the ability to read someone's soul.
And
to know
we can't understand God's mercy. Someone that's not in the state of grace, does that mean that they cannot get to heaven? No, because we don't know God's mercy. God could choose to be merciful to that person.
Right. I feel like it's interesting to think about, if you were to give somebody enough time to live and try to get to know God, how long would it take for them to convert, And it's maybe that amount of time is an eternity. Or
how long does it take for us to get to know God would be an eternity for sure, right?
Well,
that's what we do in heaven is just get to know him better and better.
Right, but how long would it take? How long would it take for somebody to choose to be in union with God?
Right, and the idea. So I would argue to get into semantics, which is always fun when you get into semantic fights.
Well, this is Deep Thoughts on the Rocks, right? Is that are we deciding on that title right now?
Oh,
yes.
I thought we had already decided.
Okay.
Your statement: does someone who's not in a state of grace, can they still go to heaven? No. That's teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. No. It's the question of you cannot tell if someone is or isn't. You cannot know if another person is in a state of grace or not.
Because the sacraments, if they're not receiving the sacraments, that is the ordinary dispensation of grace. But there is the extraordinary dispensation of grace that we cannot know whether God is working in their lives or not. So.
Because in the Roman definition, state of grace literally just means that you have the divine life flowing through you. Which is the literal definition of heaven.
Not the checkbox of the sacraments.
Oh, no. The sacraments are the ordinary dispensation towards that. Mm-hmm. But the state of grace, so grace, this is the fun definition. Grace is God. It is God. It is, Roman Catholics have a definition of grace that's different. In the Roman Catholic Church, there is the idea of the difference between uncreated grace, which is God's divine life, and created grace. The East does not have that distinction. Eastern perspective, hot take, all grace is God. We call it his divine energies. It is as much him as his essence is. It is uncreated. So to be in a state where that is flowing through you in an active way is the definition of heaven. And so if you're in that state, you're going to heaven. If you're not, you're not. Because that's literally the definition, is whether or not you are in union with God or rejecting union with God. So, but then the question then comes is, when I look at another human being, I can't see that because grace is invisible. And that's one of the great blessings of grace, is that it is invisible. Because that always allows, if I knew someone was in a state of grace or not in a state of grace, it would drastically change the way that I would interact with them. probably.
Right.
Like, but I can always just assume someone is, give them the benefit of the doubt, and be merciful, while still saying, like, in general, you should not do this thing because this thing is often really bad. But I can also pray for them with true hope that they would be converted. You know, whether they're Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, anything else, we all need conversion. We all need to be more
people.
like God. And so I can always pray for someone's conversion, and it's precisely because I do not know what's going on in their soul that I can always pray for their conversion with some hope. And that comes from John's letter where he says, some sin leads to death. I do not say that you should pray for that. Because if someone is in hell, as you said, there's no point in praying for them. Your prayer would literally be pointless. But it's the fact that I cannot tell if someone is living a heavenly life or a hellish life that gives me the ability to always be praying for them with true hope, and not just, I guess, the passion of hope, but with the theological virtue of hope. So yeah. So slight caveat to, if you're not in a state of grace, can you go to heaven? No, it's the whether or not someone's in a state of grace that becomes a much trickier question.
Wow. So I have a punch list here to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it.
Perfect.
I don't think we got to the defects of munificence.
We did not.
And then so we'll mention those, and they're really easy to comprehend.
Cool.
And then I'll talk just a tiny bit about ambition, and then we'll wrap it up. So the defects of munificence, and munificence again is inclined to do great works. Although you were saying something about just doing the minimum.
I would say, to me, the word looks... So I would say Tanquerey has chosen to go with a certain understanding of munificence. Mm-hmm. I think we can expand on the term and have it include doing your duty and the idea of giving freely something beyond your duty.
Okay. So, defects of that, do you want to wager a guess?
Yeah, it's going to be laziness and selfishness.
That's interesting. He's dealing with because it's dealing with being willing to do great expenses. Mm-hmm. He says the two defects are miserliness and extravagance. So this is the virtue lies in the middle.
I'm thinking of defect as just the vice. But you're right. You're going the vice and the counterfeit.
So this gets into finance, and I have a brother that said he might want to come on as a guest speaker on one of these and talk a bit about finance, since that was his major.
Did you know the Greek word for guest and the Greek word for host are the same word?
No, I didn't.
Weird.
It has nothing to do with what we're talking
That's
about.
so
one of my favorite things.
Did you know that the word for neighbor in Italian kind of sounds like vicinity?
They come from the same word in Latin.
That makes sense.
Yeah, whiskina.
Okay.
Moving on to
we're
the
going to digress. Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be do we want to talk about what virtue of the mean means, or do we want to just have another episode on that? We can have another episode on that.
So, like, miserliness is Scrooge. He's unwilling to support things that deserve his support. You know, is that a good working
say that
definition?
again. I've blacked
Scrooge,
out for a
he's
second.
unwilling to, like, give to the things that he ought to give to.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
He makes his money like the most important thing to him, keeping his money, and not these other good works that he could do with the money.
Yep.
And so that's miserliness.
He withholds
the penny pincher
his
says,
good works.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Extravagance is like an excessive, spend of money.
Right. It's going to be something that is. So I would say extravagance is withholding good works and covering it up by doing superfluous things that are pleasant.
Unnecessary expenditures.
Okay.
Is one of the phrases.
Yeah. It'd be the idea of like. It'd be that. So munificence would be giving your child what they need, feeding them good food and food that they like. Munificence.
Spending beyond one's means.
Yeah.
Is extravagance.
Yep, and I would say extravagance would be like if you fed your children only cake. That would be extravagance.
Yeah.
Because you're still feeding them, but you're feeding them just like brain candy or literal candy. Like you're only giving them what's pleasant and never what actually is helpful. Whereas miserliness would be the refusal to feed them at all.
Yeah. We could have an entire other episode about eating and food and about it just like eating for function or eating for enjoyment and things like that, and how it can play into like gluttony and things like that.
Cakes have layers.
Like
Yes.
onions.
Like onions. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what you guys are referencing, but that's okay.
That's okay. Everyone in our listener audience does. So
How do you
Oh,
not
okay,
know?
good. That's usually how things go with me. So
it's only from the movie Shrek, which is a cultural
What?
icon of the 20th
what? I love
21st
Shrek.
century.
Ah,
You
You don't know the onion
You
scene?
do. Let me correct you. You don't love Shrek if you don't know the onion line, the literally most famous line from the entire movie.
Ogres
Shrek
are
is-
like onions.
Because they're stinky, smelly, and nobody likes them? No, they have
okay,
layers.
I get it now. Thank you. Yeah.
Mike Myers.
This is so sad that Shrek is love and I don't love Shrek.
Shrek is love. Shrek is life. Don't look that up, listener.
No, but listen to listen to the group Shrek is Love. They're good. They write songs about Shrek.
There's
Really?
a group
We'll
called
listen to
Shrek
them after
is
this.
Love.
It's
We're
awesome.
plugging a lot of people that aren't sponsoring us.
I know. No one's sponsoring us.
All right,
I'm
at this
sponsoring
point,
us.
look up the YouTube
yeah, I
video.
guess we're sponsoring ourselves, so we can reference whoever we please.
That's fair.
Okay, so ambition, which Tanquerey was putting a kind of as opposing to magnanimity, right?
Yes.
That's where we're at here.
Both under virtue, or both under fortitude. Yes.
And he did a partial description of ambition under the magnanimity, but I'll do the full one here over in this section. So, ambition, it is it's part of like presumption, all based under like pride and vanity and things like that, I think. So, this presumption added to pride begets ambition, that is to say, the inordinate love of honors, of dignities, and of authority over others. So when you're being ambitious, you're like trying to achieve success, but for the sake of honors or dignities or authority over others. And so this is something I've I run into with certain people in my life. So I did not complete my degree, my bachelor's degree, and so I have had a lot of people that kind of just, as soon as they find that out about me, they deem me as not having any value. And I believe that possibly these people maybe have a little bit of ambition in their outlook on life, in their lifestyle, because to me, finishing a degree kind of sounds like an honor, or a dignity. I don't really know the difference between those two, and maybe Mike, you can kind of comment on that. But
Our podcast is running long, so I won't bore
Okay.
the audience with more definitions.
fair enough. Fair enough. We can talk about it later. But yeah, so it's like worldly success like that, at least in my mind, of like completing a degree, does that make you a good person? And dropping out from college, does that make you a morally bad person? I would say as long as you're still providing for yourself and for your family, that no, it doesn't really matter whether you do or do not.
Right. It's like, there's infinite things you could be ambitious in, right? There's a huge number of things you could have spent that time being ambitious about. So it's like just...
Yeah, and the pursuit of knowledge is an entirely different thing. If you're a dropout that's a deadbeat, that's not desiring to pursue knowledge, or one that just doesn't desire to pursue it through a university.
Right.
And so...
So yeah, I would say that dropping out of college, which I also did, does not make you a bad person. And
Well, thank you, Joey. I'm glad you think so.
also, I don't think it makes you an unambitious person either.
Fair enough. And one other thing here I'll say on this, or I'll read from Tanquerey, is ambition invades every sphere of life, like we were just saying. One, the political realm, where men aspire to rule others, and that oftentimes at the price of so many meannesses? I don't know how to say that.
I don't know what word you're looking at.
I don't
You're
know
across
either.
the room.
So many compromises, so many questionable practices in order to secure the votes of constituents. So in the political realm, ambition can creep in to try to just, stay in office.
Right.
And that can be dangerous, obviously. In the intellectual domain, wherein men seek stubbornly to impose their ideas on others, even with regard to questions open to free discussion. And in civil life, where men vie for the first places, high office, and the plaudits of the crowd. And fourth, even the ecclesiastical state is not exempt. For as Bossuet remarks. I don't know who that is. Do you know Bossuet?
Nah, that's cool.
Okay. Lost my place. As Bossuet remarks, how many safeguards have not been found necessary, even in ecclesiastical and religious elections, in order to curb ambition, to prevent factions, intrigues, underhand dealings, and the most criminal pledges and practices, simoniacal, these words, he uses words, contracts, and other such irregularities too, common in these matters. So, yeah, there's like, as he said, ambition can invade every sphere of life.
Indeed.
I don't know if any of that was interesting to you guys or not, but there it is.
I enjoy his use of the word simoniacal.
Yeah.
That's quite a word.
The words. It seems like every page there's a word I need to look up in this thing.
That is 1920s theology.
I'm interested in,
and I love it.
Ambition seems to have this, like, aspect of, like, being a really good thing or a really, really bad thing.
I would say it's never a good thing.
Never
under
a good
his
thing.
definition. So
yes.
Okay.
There's a difference between, again, magnanimity.
That's a good thing.
Which is the pursuit of greatness. If I want to totally riff on it, I would say ambition is the pursuit of greatness selfishly, and magnanimity is the pursuit of greatness
for God.
Yeah, altruistically.
Yes, perfect.
I see.
So
being great for essentially everyone else's sake rather than your own.
Yep. Yeah. And this comes from Thomas Aquinas' very famous definition of love is to will the good of the other. So whatever you're doing, if you're doing it for the benefit of others, it is love. And so Mother Teresa then talks about this. Everything can be done with love. Every single action can be done for the benefit of someone else. And so there's no state in life that's necessary for holiness. Holiness ought to permeate every single action and every single state of life possible.
Interesting.
And so that's where you could say magnanimity is good ambition. I think that would be totally fine for like modern parlance. Tanquerey would be upset, but he's from the 1920s and he's dead and can't tell me otherwise. So we can call magnanimity good ambition if it helps us clarify what we're thinking of. And then ambition would be bad ambition.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the thing that you're pursuing matters.
Right. We can have a whole episode on object, intention, circumstance.
Okay. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, that bears its own episode. That can get fun.
All right.
Now a word from our sponsor, Ice. Thanks, Ice, for being cold water.
Okay.
Thank you also for having another name as rocks.
Yes. Water, thank you for having 3 names for your 3 states of matter commonly found on Earth.
I think you were actually just referring to rocks on the rocks, but
Yeah.
we mean ice. Oh, okay. Got it. Oh. That's okay. See, when he first started talking...
Thanks, Nick, for always explaining what Joey means to me.
He's your friend first.
Wow. Whoa.
Whoa.
Hot take.
I guess Nick and I aren't friends. But,
I guess not.
No, I just mean he was your friend first, and yet I'm interpreting what he says to you. It's kind of funny.
I mean, yeah.
I guess we think more alike because we're in the audio world.
Maybe, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the way I think about ice is heavily, heavily influenced by my particular career plans. I would
Which
agree.
are?
I just was making fun of you a little bit.
I
You were
think
like,
it's
you were
heavily...
like, we understand each other because we work with sound. And I was like, oh, yeah. My professional lens also really affects the way I think of frozen water.
Okay.
I think the way I think of frozen water is heavily influenced by my hip-hop taste.
Oh, that's interesting. You're like an Ice Ice Baby fan. Or like you're into Ice Tea.
Or Ice Cube.
Or Ice Cube, that's true.
Wow.
Alright, I can't think of any other ice ones.
That's okay. You just rolled off a lot. Yeah.
Vanilla Ice.
Oh, right.
We've got so many options.
Wow.
Should start a rap career as like Vanilla Fire. Chocolate Fire.
Fire block. Instead of ice cube. I don't know.
Ooh.
Fire block.
Flaming Pyramid. There it is.
So I was kind of a...
Is that your
Charcoal.
nickname in high school?
Charcoal. Yeah,
I was
I'll be charcoal.
kind of assuming that by now we would have faded it out.
I mean, that's up to you. You're the editor.
Oh my gosh.
I'm
yeah, it's a
certainly
lot of
not the
pressure.
editor.
And this
That's
has
a lot of
been
pressure.
Deep Thoughts on the Rocks.
This has been some thoughts on the rocks.
So,
Some of them deep, some of them less deep.
is that your word for shallow? Just less deep?
Yeah, that's my new cover of the latest Lady Gaga song. Less deep.
Do you want to end in a
Cheers.
Do
prayer?
you? Sure. I'm not gonna lead it, but yeah, go for it.
Oh, yikes. So I wasn't going to lead it.
Oh well, you're the one that brought it up, so now you're in charge of it.
Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us together here today, that we could try to ponder the mysteries of truth and in this pursuit of truth, I suppose. And we ask that you guide our hearts and minds to you, which is the truth. And in your name we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks, guys. You can email us at deepthoughtsontheRocks@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.